relatively experienced at this point. Everyone probably heard the statement just now that recording is in progress. I know, just remember, this is still a public meeting. It's just as we are at Town Hall. So let's try to make sure we're very careful on our surroundings as well as what we say. Town manager got us the budget all last Thursday, and I hope everyone had an opportunity to go through it. I think that is absolutely paramount, that everybody does all the pre-reading, looks over the budgets, so when we come to these meetings, we're prepared with to move forward. I'm going to hand this over to Derek in just a moment. There's a lot of us here. My initial thought, and I've talked with Gail about this last weekend, I think my initial thought is the more we can hold all questions until presentations are done. If you get to a slide and there's something you have a question about, go ahead, write that down, and we'll come back around the room as people have questions. Raise your hand, use the hand function at the bottom. If you've lost internet connection and you absolutely missed something, please speak up, and then we can cover what you missed or whatever. But we're going to play this by ear, see how well it goes. And on that note, Derek, I will hand it over.
Okay, I'm going to share a PowerPoint with you. I'm not going to have it on a slideshow, but you'll have all slides to the left. Just let me know if you can't read some of it. What's up? Okay, I'll start. Tonight, I'm pleased to present the Town of Topsham FY22 budget for your consideration. It combines the municipal services budget with the expected MSAD 75 education budget and the expected SAG County tax levy to produce the basis for the property tax levy. While this budget contains Topsham's expected share of the county tax levy and MSAD 75 budget, it only includes the details for the municipal departments, which will be presented by the town departments starting tonight. The budget will result, if everything remains the same, with a 1.6% increase in municipal expenditures, mostly due to investments in capital improvements. To supplement the proposed budget as stated in the memo that I sent out, the town and public library's annual reports for FY20 were emailed and posted on the town's website for your review, which should provide background and insight to town operations, personnel, and accomplishments. This past year, we made great progress on several longstanding goals, continued to work on important initiatives that will lead us into the future, and adjusted to challenges and uncertainty during the initial onset of COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, we made the adjustments while we're going through the last budget cycle. Prior to drafting this budget, we prioritized expenditures based on legal requirements, public safety, public works, infrastructure, vehicles and equipment, and general government, while focusing on maintaining a stable and responsible budget, trying to keep the mill rate stable, improving service to the community, maintaining our current infrastructure, and using the town's 2018 comprehensive plan in our planning efforts. The following slides will highlight influential factors in this year's budget. We talk about expenditures. Personnel costs make up over half the budget. These expenditures are relatively flat this year due to lower than expected increases in the health premiums, smaller increases in COLA, decreased HRA funding levels, and the hiring of new employees at lower rates. In the past year, we were faced with the COVID-19 pandemic, and unforeseen events required us to adjust our staffing. Over the fall, I brought this to the Board of Selectmen and talked about some of the necessary things we need to do to adjust. The Board of Selectmen approved the upgrading of a deputy clerk position to a higher wage due to increased tasks and responsibilities. Well-deserved, and it should have been addressed years ago. And we also promoted one of the assistant clerk tax part-time positions to full-time, and it's really served us well since then. In fiscal year 22, we're requesting one full-time position and 40 hours of part-time wages to meet the demand in two departments. The fire department is requesting one full-time firefighter EMT, basically converting a portion of the per diem to full-time, and the excess will be in benefits. And within the facilities department, 40 hours for part-time maintenance and custodial work. This budget shows FY22 wage and benefits will be relatively flat and increase by only 0.4%. which is not common. And this includes 1 full-time position and 40 hours of part-time wages. Solid waste has increased. Now, I'm basically highlighting some of the things that may stand out because I gave you percentages in the year to year as well as the budget. But they've increased approximately 5% due to price increases in waste disposal, demo debris, and hauling costs. Prices are just rising. Fiscal year 22 will be the final contract year with Pine Tree Casella. And with that, the contract for Pine Tree Casella will end next year, and we're going to go out with an RFP to get more bids for the next 3 years. I can safely say that it'll be much higher, I think, after next year. And I think we benefited from the Brunswick landfill closing and getting a good contract when we went out for the RFP 2 years ago. The solid waste budget shows an increase also because we budgeted for a main DEP directed long-term point of entry treatment system agreements. Sometimes we refer to those as POETs. With properties located on Townsend Way, this was required to maintain and, if it ever comes to it, replace their water treatment filter systems. And these consist of 2 homes in that area. And that agreement was signed earlier this year, I think at the beginning of the year. And so what we budgeted for, and it may not be spent, is in the event that one of those systems went down. Utilities represent another growth point in our budget. Sewer rates are expected to remain stable, but water rates will increase by 9% and 16% for fire hydrant supply due to debt service resulting from the construction of the Brunswick Topsham Water District building. We can expect probably a 20% increase next year to pay off the debt service on that building. Electricity rates are expected to increase about 7%, and natural gas will fluctuate with usage and temperature and is expected to increase. And we just recently found out, probably a few weeks ago, that MDOT contract gas and diesel prices have decreased significantly and are reflected in the proposed budget. And I just verified that today with Dennis. With capital, as stated earlier in the first slide and what our priorities were and the goals, we kind of looked at capital and said, okay, this is how we're going to do this. With public safety, you'll see we're asking for a police cruiser, in-car cameras, and EMS cardiac monitors. Public Works will be a plow truck and a forklift. And when it comes to paving in the Elm Street culvert, we'll talk in much detail with those 2 items. One is with the Elm Street culvert project. It's absolutely required and it's necessary. And we'll get into that more with Dennis and myself when we get to capital. And paving projects this year for the fiscal year 22 budget is in the amount of $650, which is an increase of $300,000 from last year. And infrastructure and replacement and maintenance, we'll be talking about capital replacement, capital maintenance, and we renamed a line that used to be called office equipment and made that IT, tech, and comms to make sure that infrastructure is taken care of and components are replaced when failed or when expected life is over. We'll also be asking for Parks and Rec truck with a plow attachment. We get the estimates for that. And every year we put money away for assessing, basically set aside for a reval. Okay, revenues. Total revenues have largely increased due to an increase in value from new construction and changing market conditions, state revenue sharing, excise tax, and EMS transport fees, which we've seen a significant increase in, and a higher fund balance than last year. To summarize that a little bit more, 0.8% increase in overall valuation included about $9 million in value from new construction. Total valuation of existing property is expected to increase to maintain equity with the changing market conditions as well this year. And of course, we're all kind of shocked at the real estate market last year, but we think it might continue to go up as well this year. The governor's current budget calls for revenue sharing to increase to 3.75%, but the state treasurer office will not publish its projection until mid-March. So we'll still be in a cycle so we can adjust as appropriate when that projection comes out. Until we know the projection, we are using the revenue projection from last year as an estimate for next year, the amount of $878,727. We did that same thing last year due to the uncertainty of where we're going to head with COVID and potential impact with the state. So I think we're in good shape there. We are seeing a continuing increase in ambulance transport fees, as mentioned earlier, and we're predicting an increase of about $120,000 this upcoming fiscal year. And Chief McLaughlin will talk about that during his presentation, but that's a big help to the town. And as requested by the Board of Selectmen, we have kept the unassigned fund balance in this budget at 16.7% of the total appropriations. Last year, we dropped it to 16.7 because previous years you were at 18 and it continued to rise. So we are making movement and keeping it low to keep the tax rate down. And finally, I think the budget and assumptions made with respect to revenue and Topsham's share of the county and school budgets will result in a stable mill rate in fiscal year 22. We won't know, I think, for a few weeks anyways, where the school and where the county are coming in for their increases and what percentage increase they may have. What I did in this budget is predict about 5% for the county, which seemed to be in line with previous years. And I predicted 4% for the school. Unofficially, I've heard from the superintendent about a month ago that he was thinking about 2%. Of course, the school board and the group as a whole had not gotten together yet. So I just doubled that and we went in at 4. Any percent for the school, actually 1% for the school, whether it be below 4 or above 5, is equal to approximately $111,000. So whenever we find out what that percent is, we can make adjustments as necessary. And we can move on to the first department, administration. So administration is Department 1. Really, the only change here is actually a decrease in the expenditures, and that's basically because we just hired a new assistant town manager, and of course, I came in as town manager with a different contract. So I will say, as I mentioned earlier, all wage and benefits increases are what they are, and the reasons I gave earlier, the reason why they're different. With benefits in particular, things change throughout the year. There could be a change in benefits for health insurance or dental because somebody went from family to single coverage. Or there could be a change in retirement because somebody chose not to participate in ICMA. So there's changes like that or life-changing events, reasons why that would change. Also, with new hires, they may come in with a lower than expected plan. In other words, we have to budget for the highest plans, whether, like, say, family coverage for insurance, or someone participating or somebody participating in the retirement system through main PERS. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to come in here and use those full benefits. They could come in as a single person, doesn't need the family plan, and they may not participate in PERS. So we have a lot of unexpended money in that situation. So that's where we are. So with administration, I just wanted to mention with dues, memberships, and publications, that line is specific for paying our Maine Municipal Association membership of $9,500. Municipal officers pretty much remain stable. Where you see the difference in that price is, I believe, and Kathy, you can verify this for me. I think FICA and workers' comp was essentially taken out of professional services last year or the year before. Yes.
Can we, as we finish a department, can we just pause for a second, look around,
Sure.
Make sure there's no questions before we jump to the other one? I'm going to scroll. If you get a question, try to use the raise hand thing at the bottom. And if you're using the digital, I just want to bring to everyone's attention, if you're using the digital budget that we were all sent, when you see the red triangle in a box, there's a note usually there, and it explains exactly what a particular item, so dues, memberships, publications, as Derek explained, it's the MMA amount, but it would have been explained there. So Any questions? I don't see anything. This was an easy one to
Hey, Dave,
go ahead.
who's controlling this? Who's controlling this? Is that you?
No, Derek is.
I don't know. Is this a lag? Because there seems to be a lot of lag when Derek starts talking about a particular slide and it's still showing an old slide.
It must
Yeah,
be on
no,
your
it
end.
might be frozen on your end or the transmission.
Well, no, I can see the cursor running around. I'm watching it on YouTube. And I'm the only one watching it on YouTube, so I'm just saying. All right, never mind. Just keep on.
Pat,
There is a lag on YouTube, everyone. YouTube's a little bit behind the live Zoom.
Pat, you had a question?
Yeah, a couple of small ones here, Derek, and these are or lower materiality dollars, but I did see it in numerous other departments, so just looking for a little clarification. But down in the utilities on Department 1, you're running at $300 right now. You're budgeting for $1,200, whereas it was $1,300 last year. So there was a significant difference between the actuals and the budgets. Any quick answer on that, on
Yeah.
what's going on?
I can. This was established a while ago. So we have both cell phones for department heads or stipends. The stipends for the department heads are $50 a month. And so what you see here is, for instance, myself, I've been getting a $50 a month stipend for the year. Mark, the assistant town manager, came on in August. And unfortunately, we've been behind giving him a stipend. So he didn't get it for the first 2 months, and he hasn't gotten it since then. But he'll be getting that money since retroactive to August.
Okay, great. And then the other question in this department, everything looks to be in pretty good order, but there were some fluctuations in other departments. So just curious on the other employee benefits, what is that? What's in there?
Yep. So other employee benefits are budgeting for sick buyback. And when it comes to, and what that is employees here in town are able to sell back half of the unused sick time that they accrued in that year. So
Okay.
all employees get 1 sick day a month. And let's just say you had an employee that used 2 sick days and they get 10 days left at the end of the year. They're allowed to sell back 5 of those days.
Okay.
So that's what we budget for there. And the only other thing in other employee benefits is that public works employees, it covers their meals in this line. So when you get to public works, it's a little bit different because they include meals.
All right. Thanks, Derek.
Sure. Any other questions with admin?
I don't see anything, Derek. Let's jump to the next.
Okay, municipal officers, it is what it is, hasn't changed, just a small difference. Professional services are basically for Patty Williams, taking notes and meeting minutes.
Any questions? No, I'm just going to do it every time, Derek, just so I'm training myself as we get to the big ones.
Thank you.
All right, keep going.
Okay, finance. We hired a fantastic finance director back in September, and one of the best assets the town has hired. And so basically what you see here in this department is a change in wage and benefits for the 2 positions. So there's a wage difference between our new finance director and the one that had retired out of here. And I think basically COLA is a factor, and potential. And I think Brandy may or may not have a longevity, but it's basically COLA in the new position. Any questions with finance?
Not seeing anything.
Okay. All right, central services. Central services, quite a bit of detail in this department. The bigger ones, professional development. Well, let me go down each line item if you don't mind. So advertising dropped about $1,000. In previous years, it was kind of a catch-all for anything that had to be advertised. we kind of limited it now to advertisement for jobs. We've gone out to different different mediums such as Indeed, same old paper classifieds, but so we take it out of this line. Any ads from the crier or newspapers dealing with public or legal notices are also taken out of here. And we budgeted a bit for assessing if there's a board of assessment review for legal notices and advertisements. So that's where the 3,000 comes from. It came down a little bit because they were taking out a little bit of money for advertising for the crier for the town meeting. And then there's some other monies taken out of other lines for that town meeting warrant, which is in excess of $3,000. What we did this year is we put all of that money associated with elections and town meeting into that particular department. So we've kind of consolidated all the expenditures into the appropriate department, which is elections and town meeting. Professional development, in our contracts as well as the personnel, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Professional development is basically all of those courses, classes, informational type sessions for our entire staff. Generally, most of them are provided by MMA, but even though we're members, we just get a discount on what the courses actually cost. So for all of the departments, I have a list of everything that everybody's going to, actually down to the dollar spent. So I didn't want to put that in your notes because it would have clobbered you, but I can go through any of the departments and answer that for you. So the total is 13,700. There is an increase because we actually have new people on board, new finance director, new police chief, new police lieutenant, as well as some of the people here that actually work in town hall and the public works director. Of course, this past year, we were unable to send anybody to professional development classes unless it was an online class that we had to pay for. So we're going to have quite a bit of savings, I think, this year if things don't open up going into next year. So that's what we're budgeting for, $13,700. Education tuition reimbursement. This is something that is in our personnel policy as well as each of the contracts to do tuition reimbursement for employees that would like to pursue an education that is related to their occupation. This is a great incentive also for recruiting. And as evident by our increase here, how I do this is I go around to each of the departments and ask them to ask their employees who intends to go to school within the next 18 months, and then budget accordingly. So right now, town-wide, we budgeted for 8 courses. And I'd say the majority of it are town members who are getting their master's degrees. So that's where that comes from. Our recognition line, that was for the Boston Post cane that we removed from the tax clerk office last year. And this is for recognition events, names, plaques, and awards. As I mentioned last year, we have a recognition appreciation committee, and we have just met, I think, 2 months ago, and we have an Employee of the Year award that we'll be putting in Town Hall, and we're getting the plaque made as budgeted last year for Town Hall to be displayed. And hopefully within the next month or so, we'll have the design, and that plaque will be up by town meeting. And the History Committee, we still have $50 budget for that. I don't think the History Committee's met, but we kept that money in there. I've talked to Rod, and it appears that they've been informed. They just haven't had a chance to spend any money this year. Not that they want to, but it's just because we've been inside. So if things change, I'm sure it's an active group, a proactive committee, that money will come in handy for them. The Memorial Day events last year got canceled because of COVID, so we just kind of kept that, going across. It increased from the previous year, I think fiscal year 20, because flags and marker costs had increased. So we left that there. The office equipment and maintenance, that's just basically maintaining our desks, our phones, any accessories. and a bunch of other smaller office furniture and other equipment that I can't think of right now. But we added $500 because what we did is the tax clerk department had a line for office equipment. So we took that out of tax clerk and put it into central services. Office supplies remain the same. We're on target this year. If you have the actuals that I kind of put in there as of December 31st, we're pretty much right there. And leases and licenses. What we've done here is we've combined every software outside of, I think, one or two that are in the police department into this line. This covers ION networking, the management of our system. It'll cover our website, even though this year, we're not paying any, actually, we're not paying anything for the next 2 years after this year. But in fiscal year 24, that amount will increase, but I think we have it covered here. So I don't think you would expect an increase in 3 years because I think some things are going to fall off. Our budget document for our copiers, that's the software. Our data software, a webinar and Zoom accounts. Munis comes from this line, our annual maintenance fee. All of our vision software through assessing. Our commercial and agricultural estimators from assessing. All of our, well, I think most of our, if not all of our fire EMS softwares, that's emergency and inspection maintenance reporting, in-house billing, emergency reporting software, link between dispatch and trucks for mapping and info and that sort of thing. Spillman software out of the police department is covered by SAG County, so that's not in here. If you're ever wondering if you're familiar with Spillman, we do not pay for it. Our K9 software, it's like a pack track software, is paid for out of here. Our radar trailer software and our MyRec software for the rec department, and our HVAC software, as well as our fob software, basically our access entry fobs for the buildings, comes from this line, and a few other smaller ones. And the rest of the lines are pretty much the same. We had a small increase in our phones in fiscal year 20. Our actuals were 11,144. We just upped it to 11,200. Any questions with central services?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Derek, with the education tuition reimbursement, are we requiring employees to commit to an extended leave with the town after we help pay for a degree?
In the police department, although nobody in the police department is in this line right now, they do. As far as work, it's a reimbursement for us, and frankly, I think we've only paid out one class last year, and that was for Chief McClellan. This year, we have 2 fairly new hires. One of them just registered for a master's program. And so we don't have anything in writing, Bill.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to dwell on this. Sometimes, it's just like anything. If we're going to pay all this money for someone to increase their education, which you would think would benefit the town, which is the whole reason why you offer this perk, then the town would like to get something back on it. The same way we were doing with police officers. We had the problem of sending them to the main Justice Academy, and then they get back, and within a year they're gone somewhere else for higher money. So
right. I think I understand. My thoughts on this too are: one, it's a great thing to have an incentive for our employees to stay here. I think having this, it's a reimbursement, so we don't pay for it up front. They have to meet a grade.
Right.
Also, it's just basically supporting our staff and letting them personally grow, because in essence, I think if you personally grow with your education, it's going to help us professionally as a whole, as a town. So I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, I feel like, this is something that that we do. I think it was for good reason, to hold them to it. We can look at that.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Well, that's fine. I mean, I helped put this policy in with Rich a couple of years ago because the policy that it replaced was basically nothing. It said, yeah, we'll reimburse you some money, and it's a town manager, up to the town manager. And it was, my opinion, that it needed to be tightened up a little bit, and that's where we're at now. We all know the military uses it, and BIW uses it, and something like that. So I was just wondering, but yeah, it probably seems that in most cases that people who are going to use this perk are not using it to use it as a potential stepping stone to then get their degree, then shop themselves to other towns. But I just wanted to ask the question. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question on codification. We've only actually spent $1,872.56 and we raised $3,500. Do you see any more spent out of that budget? Because it can't be really updated until town meeting or a town meeting.
Yeah.
And the
Anybody-
other time we only spent 1,195. It seems like that's inflated some, unless there's something we don't know about.
Any department heads want to answer?
Yeah, I'll step in. This is Rod.
Hi, Rod.
This is, we really never know from the planning office how the codification is all based on the amount of text that is being amended in our code.
Right.
We did switch and reduce the cost to just go online and not do the printing. We do in-house printing. So on an annual basis, I think we've covered with that line the expenditures that we do, but we never really have a good clue about the actual cost until we get the estimate from the codifiers, which doesn't come until about just prior to town meeting.
The only reason I'm questioning is the history. We've not spent that much. One year we raised $3,970. We spent 1,195, and then so forth, so on. So that was my question.
It's solely dependent on the amount of text that gets amended. So
That
there's a year where
3970
there's a-
The
Pardon?
3970 was an actual amount.
Okay,
Right, that's an
true,
actual
it
rating.
was, yes, I see
Yeah.
that, yeah.
So we have bounced around.
Yeah.
So in some years, we expend more than anticipated on that line just because we've gone through a bigger amendment, I suppose.
And we do expect postage to go up 6.25%. Is there word that postage is going up, or do we expect more mailings?
Postage went up a bit because we took it out of the clerk's department for $500. We put it into central services.
Okay.
Right now we're at 5,600-ish, probably a little higher now, because my actuals are from December. But that $500 increase from last year is the clerk's postage moving to this department.
Thank you.
Derek, I got one question, more of a comment. Under the Memorial Day line, now as we have a better understanding of COVID, if by chance that Memorial Day parade is canceled, you had talked about that it's for flags, memorials, and plaques and such. I would expect this year, we would, whether we have a parade or not, we still have the ability to do flags. We have the ability to do markers where we do. So I would expect something to come out of there. So it's more of a comment that Memorial Day isn't just the parade. There's also the other ways to honor. So I would expect we spend something whether we have a parade or not.
Yeah, thank you. That's good to hear. Okay. Linda, are you here? Linda's going
am.
to be presenting GA, which is Department 24. You have to scroll down a bit if you're on it digitally, and followed by Elections, which is Department 9. Okay, Linda.
Hi, good evening. Linda Dumont, Town Clerk. The General Assistance Department has been very quiet this past year, so I've reduced all the budget lines except for other. I receive a few calls each week and make the appropriate referrals. Presently, I am only taking telephone applications due to COVID, and so far this year, I've only had a handful of people. I believe most of it's due to additional resources being available because of the state of emergency. There's also extended unemployment benefits available to people, and evictions are not allowed during the state of emergency as well. And there is additional rental assistance available through Maine State Housing. So there has been nothing spent out of the GA at this point. As far as anticipated revenues, that's client-related expenses, and those are reimbursed at 70% by the state. Heating assistance fund, although we have not spent anything out of that fund this year, we have assisted 4 people, 4 families with heat, and that was through cards donated from the community. We continue to provide holiday support from the community through donations. It's been very quiet, and I really don't know if it's going to change or not. It just depends on what's going on out there. Thank you.
Are there any questions on GA? I do not see anything, Linda, so on to the next one.
On to the next. Okay, challenges and accomplishments. Well, we all know it was a very steady election schedule this past year. Between the number of elections that we had and the changes due to the pandemic, it was both very challenging and rewarding. We held our first March primary in many years. And then we went right into dealing with the pandemic and the challenges that brought about. We had another primary and school budget validation in June. And then in July, we had our special town meeting, which was postponed from May. With much planning and help from all the town departments, we actually had a very successful first ever drive-in town meeting. It was attended by 126 voters, and people received it very well. Absentee voting, in August, we started planning for the presidential election, and we began taking applications for absentee ballots in August. We also started recruiting and training new election workers and volunteers. We installed the outside ballot drop box that residents found very convenient. We processed the most amount of absentee ballots in Topsham's history, about 5,000. And then in November, we held the presidential election at the new high school, and that actually was the perfect venue. It was much easier to comply with all the safety protocols in this new location. Nothing but positive feedback. And we've also secured the school for future June and November elections. We've secured a new moderator for town meetings, which is John Lloyd. So we've had a busy election year in the clerk's office. As far as expenditures, as Derek had mentioned, all the town meeting costs were moved from central services to this department. So you'll see an increase in outside services in the advertising line. That allows for ads for a special town meeting, change of polling place ads, and the usual nomination papers and election notices and such. Professional services, that now includes money for a moderator. Normally our previous moderator did not charge, he volunteered, but we now have a budget for a moderator for town meetings. Money was moved into to print the town warrant for the crier. Also, outside audio equipment is in there, portable toilets, food and drink for workers setting up the town meeting, and this is all if we do an outside town meeting again. If we don't, then we reduce that budget by about $3,500. Voting machine rentals, that was moved from the outlay line to the outside services. That remains the same. The fairground contribution, we're leaving that as well in case we need additional elections and the school may not be an option at that time. Any questions?
Thing around. One last check. All set, Linda.
Thank you.
Okay, the next is Department 5. Ed Bobolak will be presenting this department.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ed Boblick, Director of the Tax Office. It's good to be here with you all. The tax office budget is 97% wages and benefits. I did the math. So that doesn't leave me a whole lot to talk about, so I'll try to be brief. Speaking of wages, this first slide covers the staffing in the office and the changes we made this past year, which should set us up well to improve our staff's knowledge and service over the coming years. And speaking of that, I cannot give the staff enough credit over this past year. We all know the challenges they faced with not just the pandemic. There was a software conversion and other medical absences. And not only did they keep the town running, they were a credit to themselves and our town. So that salary and wages last year were well spent. I can't thank them enough. The other lines on here, on that first slide, were administrative changes that Derek already touched on. And the lien costs, which the budget has gone up over the years for that, but that's all because the certified mail costs go up. And that's literally what that line is paying for. And 2 years ago, the Registry of Deeds raised their filing costs 25%. So that's the jump there. But otherwise, we filed, even through the pandemic, just over 100 liens and got to between 10 and 20 foreclosure notices, which is right in the range it's been ever since I've worked here. So that stayed fairly stable. The other lines on there, advertising is just for dog licenses, and the mileage went up this year because with the increased staffing, we'll actually be able to attend the training that Derek mentioned was in the training budget. So that brings us to the second slide, which is revenues. As it shows here, the revenues over the past 3 years have still been fairly stable. We're up about 1 million overall and 100,000 in excise each year. I apologize for not extrapolating the current year out, but again, I did the math and we're on pace for about 25 million total revenue, a little over, and about 2.2 million in excise. So despite the uncertainty, the revenues have stayed fairly consistent. The last point for the office address is the only major fluctuation we did see through the pandemic, which was inland fisheries, because that could be done fairly easily online and has nothing to do with us when it is. The volume there dropped drastically, but it doesn't really affect our revenue because it's not a big ticket item. And that's brings us to the end of the slide. I told you I'd try to be brief. I'll take any questions.
I have some.
Yep,
The mileage, whoops, I'm sorry. Was somebody else
no,
talking?
that's fine. I just saw Pat's hand up. So I
Oh.
called, I don't care.
Does Pat
The
wanna go?
mileage, yeah, the mileage is up. We haven't spent it the last few years because we haven't been able to get anybody out of the office to go to training. So the $200 was never spent. When we itemized the trainings that people can go to this year, as Derek was talking about earlier, that's why that line went up this year.
And do we use the town car or just our own vehicles?
Well, we haven't done training in the past. That's a good question.
Mhm. And then on revenues, my question is, does the town clerk not do inland fisheries and dog licenses anymore?
Town clerk does,
Go ahead, Linda.
well, the town clerk does do The office does both, yes.
Well, the reason I asked is because he said mostly the advertising was for dog licenses. So that's in the tax office, not in the town clerk's budget.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
in that budget.
Okay, and then on revenues, I understand and really glad the revenues are going up, but I just don't want to see us over predict them because, and you probably haven't, it's just a statement I'm making because it's money that we use that if we do over predict, then it has to go back to the people or we have to put it. So that's just a statement.
Yep, and that's absolutely correct. And we did try. We're on pace for 2.2 million on the excise, and we only projected 1.9 and change for next year, just because it's very hard to predict in these current days where we're going to go, and if you're going to err, you do want to err on the cautious side.
Yeah, Ruth, I'm sorry. This is Derek. Thanks for the
Hi,
comment.
Derek.
I can tell you two areas that I know will be higher. One will be excise tax. But again, that was somewhat done on purpose because we didn't want to catch ourselves later on overestimating revenue. And the other one is in CAT TV fees.
Right.
Our finance director just received the first payment and we received a payment of $65,000. So we're probably $5,000 short in that revenue line. So we're not over predicting.
Okay. Yep. And thank you.
Yeah, so Ed, this is probably more of a question for Derek, but Derek, that retirement line, that it looks out of whack. I understand there's the increase in salaries this year, but that's a pretty significant increase in retirement. And I think I did see that in a couple of other departments as well. Off the top of your head, do you know what's driving that beyond just straight increase in salary?
Yeah, for the retirement line, that's one of our two programs. So it's the main state retirement system, and it's also the 457. So in that particular department, we have two new employees, and they came on within the last year. So that very well could be the numbers. Now, these numbers for wages and benefits come directly from our payroll. The finance director, basically gave me the numbers for wages and all these benefits. So if you want specifics on who they are, I can let you know. But you can have first of all, we went from a part-time to full-time position. But even with that said, a difference between the family plan and the single plan is close to $11,000 to $13,000.
In retirement?
Yeah, that'd be
sorry, retirement.
We also had an increase in Main State Retirement is having an increase in July also.
What is that increase?
Well, off the top of my head, it was significant. It was at least 1 or 2%.
And does that mean what is the match now? Is it 10% for every?
It's more than that. It's like 11 and 13 for,
Wow.
we have two different plans. One is for the police and fire, and the other one is for everybody else. And the police and fire is traditionally a little bit more expensive than the regular plan. But I can get you the actual increases in each plan and what the employer match increase was. I can give those to Derek tomorrow, and he can get them out to the committee.
Yeah, and Derek, it sounds like Kathy has her ducks in a row with those types of percentages and the increase. And so I guess all that I would ask is if you guys could just circle back and make certain that it's in order and just let us know, please.
Sure.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a hefty increase when it was already a 10% match. So just my comment.
It is very hefty.
It's too bad. So.
Any other questions for Department 5? I'm scrolling through.
Dave, I've got one.
Go ahead, Matt.
Derek.
You're muted.
Yeah. This was something that was brought up last year. I think we got a notification. This is sort of pertinent to revenue, but we got a notification from Comcast about renewing our contract with them for service provision for the area. And it was essentially an advance notice saying that they were intending to renew their contract. Has that been renewed, and is that what the CAT TV revenue stream is in the budget?
Yeah, when I talked to the regional director last year for Comcast, he stated that that won't be impacted. It was more of these a la carte fees that could have impacted us, upwards to $2,000. That's it. Completely different than these CAT TV fees that revenue stream that we see here. The contract is due to be renewed next year. And so we will most likely get on board probably here in the fall to take a look at that.
Cool, thanks.
Sure.
Quick one,
Go ahead.
Derek, in regards to your last comment, are we expecting any significant changes or we don't know yet?
I'm going to say no, based on what Comcast told me about 8 months ago.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So the one thing that I can guarantee is your bill will go up each year by about $5. I promise you that.
That's a good point, Matt.
I think you're underselling it. It's probably every 6 months. So I don't see any other comments. One last click through. Not seeing any hands raised. All right, let's do the next one.
Okay, thank you. Next is Department 8, Assessing. Justin Hennessy, the assessor.
Good evening, everyone. Mine should be fairly brief. Every line on my department for my request is flat from last year with no changes. There's a couple more slides that I have that are strictly informational stuff that I've given to you in the past. They're there if you guys want them for informational purposes, but I won't really go over them unless you actually have questions on them. So in a nutshell, things are continuing on as they have here. I'm doing my best with, I didn't get any field workers out last year due to COVID. Hopefully the situation will change this year and I can have some field work. And hopefully I can actually have my personal property data clerk in the springtime as I do in most years, but did not this year, trying to minimize the number of people coming into the town office.
Justin, as we don't have any of these slides with us, the only copy we have is what we see tonight. So any of the trends you want to show and go over, please feel free to do that because this is our only view of those.
Yeah, Justin, I'll go through the slides right here.
I see a couple bar graphs.
Okay. Sorry, I thought you guys actually had the PowerPoint slides as well. I thought they'd been distributed to you.
Nope.
So if you want to move on to the taxable value. So as you've noticed in the last 2 years, the market's climbed quickly. Sales continue to do so. Everything that, even with the increases to market value I did before the tax commitment this year, with almost no exception, every sale that has come through since then has exceeded the assessed value still. So I'll probably make another market adjustment this summer, but with spending, with the overall budget looking to be relatively flat, what I would expect to see is the rate would drop to accommodate higher values. So it shouldn't mean a huge shift for most properties. The next slide, if Derek wants to step forward to it, is just the tax rate history. That one's literally just showing you what the trend has been over the last 20 years of how the tax rates fluctuated. Prior to 2007, you see a difference between what was actually printed on the bill and what our actual effective rate was, and that's because our assessments were so far below market value. The tax rates were actually higher than that they would have been if they'd been at 100%.
Now, Justin, when we look at like that last slide, values and such, and not thinking of a catastrophic pullback, but more just in general, is things slow? How slow is there a history of things slowly coming in any way, or every time it comes crashing back, it comes crashing back hard?
So if you think back to when the market crashed in 08 or 09, if you will, our actual sales market here didn't really peter out until around 2012. It slowed down in how quickly it was rising, but it didn't turn the other way until actually a couple of years after the rest of the country. Derek, if you want, would you go back to that value slide?
Yep.
So you actually see in 1112 and 1213 that the taxable value of the town reduced. So when I'm making market adjustments, I'm always looking at sales from the prior 12 months or the prior 18 months if I need a few more sales. So I'm always trending to follow a little bit behind, but the goal is to keep ours close to 100%. So at least in the past, it didn't drop like a rock. Hopefully it wouldn't now, but I mean, it's hard to predict that. The values are climbing so quickly now. Yeah, I kind of have that sense that it can't be sustainable at the rate it's going. It's climbing way too quickly for people's incomes aren't going up that quickly. At some point, the market has to max out. Does that answer you, Dave?
It does. Thank you. I appreciate that. Because that's a great fear, is how quick does it retract? I agree with you. At some point, this continual climb has got to slow down. But if we have a history of being slower, that's great.
Initially in the springtime, I would have expected that crash to happen this summer, but it was completely counterintuitive. There's been the few articles I've seen about it, there's been a lot of out-of-state buying pressure, especially in mid-coast Maine. People are moving here from other states looking to be in less dense areas. And in particular, if we've got good internet access and where they can still telecommute, we may still see that as an attractive market for us for a while.
Thank you.
Just a comment, as usual, I think you always do a great job in your presentation and assessing anyway, Justin. However, as I do many of the departments, but just a comment, like I have seen it being in the industry myself at one time, I've seen those highs and then I've also seen the quick lows. And like you say, the elastic will only stretch so far. So we just wonder when it's going to happen. Not to be doom and gloom, but it's got to. So thank you, Justin.
Thank you. And then this last slide, I think we've kind of already touched on that a little bit. It's really just talking about how the market's changed. I continue to do sales reviews in-house every year. That's allowed us to put off having a third party come in. The last time we had a third party in was in 2007, and it cost us over $300,000. So doing it in-house lets us put that off for a little while. As long as our quality rating with our auditor for Maine Revenue stays good, I'm comfortable with that on the residential side at least. On the commercial, we probably could stand to have a third party come in sometime, and we've discussed potentially putting an RFP out sometime in the fall for implementation of that project in the future. Commercial markets are a little harder for me to make adjustments on because we only have a few sales, and in some commercial stuff, there's nothing to pair sales with because they're unique. So that market can tend to be a little more national in nature. So a third-party company may be better equipped than I am to have a good unbiased opinion on resetting those values. And again, with COVID, that's a little bit of a concern with me, that more so than the residential side, as people start telecommuting more, will there be less commercial space that's actually needed? So will that be a bigger and a sooner impact on values on the commercial sector than we're seeing on the residential side?
Yes, and I absolutely agree with the commercial side. And I think it's not just doing it through Zoom or Intel or any of that. It's just that people are getting used to ordering, not going in the stores and things like that. And the more we do that, the less retail that's needed. And we're starting to see that. And developers are starting to say they want to move away from retail. And that is correct, isn't it, Justin? Have you heard that they want to build more apartments?
There's been some talk about, particularly on like office space, that companies may not need as large a square footage footprint as they used to have because they may not ever have as many employees physically in the building as they used to. So it's definitely a trend we want to keep an eye on. think that's pretty much I had, unless any of you had any other questions for me.
Looking through here, I don't see any hands up, Justin. And I see a bunch of shaking heads, no.
Don't bother coming out to my house for a while, all right, please? I'd appreciate it.
Thank you all for your time. Have a good evening.
Thank you, sir.
He came out to mine this fall and the boys saw the town car in it and they thought it was a cruiser, so they didn't know what the heck was going on. All right, facilities.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do facilities, Department 13. The biggest change with facilities is going to be the 40 hours that we're requesting for part-time wages for custodial maintenance. Currently, as most of you are aware, we have 5 sites. Basically 2.5 get custodial work done on a daily basis. That's town hall, the public library, and sometimes public safety. We thought that 40 hours of custodial maintenance should cover all the facilities, maybe except for solid waste, to make sure that the bathrooms are clean, the common areas are sanitized and clean, and more importantly, to keep up with this work. I came in 2 years ago. We made some great efforts since then to make sure our current infrastructure is kept up and to mitigate any potential replacements of infrastructure. We've implemented 2 contracts, our HVAC periodic maintenance or contract, as well as our roofing, which will give us not only minor maintenance done on a continuous basis, but inspections and cleaning filters, replacing those things that should be done on a routine basis. The 40 hours I think are important. One, we were thinking about, do we go full-time or request a full-time person? But I think we can do this without going with a full-time person and paying the extra benefits, just to see where how much we can. I'm sorry, I'm kind of bouncing around with words, but basically we have to take care of 5 sites, and one person right now is just not cutting it. We've purchased several machines to clean carpets, to clean flooring, to alleviate some of that, to reduce the man hours required to take care of it with a mop and a broom and a vacuum, but it's still not enough. Particularly with COVID and the amount of sanitization that Annette is doing, and she's our full-time person, we're just not able to keep up. So in short, I think this is much needed. And I think 40 hours of part-time wages would be able to cover all of our facilities, or at least give us a good chance to evaluate where we are with that. I envision half of this going towards somebody who's really geared towards maintenance, somewhat to what Mike Labby has done for many years since he's retiring, to do basic light replacements, work out, do the floors and do those things that require a little bit more maintenance background. And then the other 20 for custodial work, helping with the bathrooms at the facilities that are not currently being done. So that's really the big impact here on this department. What I've also done is we continue to consolidate into this department, like we did central services, for anything building related. 2 items that are different, or 2 line items different from last year, as we combined the HVAC and the plumbing lines into one. That's it. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Derek, I do. First one comment, why, and it should be, if we're going to look for 2 part-time individuals, we should have this under part-time payroll, not listed as full-time payroll would be my guess.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
So
but that was the last minute change. I'm sorry to interrupt. Last minute change, if you think about a full-time person, and that last minute we decided that maybe part-time wages would be better off, and we looked at to find people quicker.
Okay. When you say maintenance, in my head, and we had an annual meeting with the library a couple months ago, and we know that buildings have needs, right? Upkeep, whether door strikes, whatever it may be. there's needs. Would this maintenance individual be that form of maintenance? Or are we simply talking changing light bulbs and filters? I know we agreed 2 budgets ago, I believe, maybe it was just 2 budgets ago, a DPW employee that would take on some of those items. And I don't know as we've done that. So are we tackling any of the hands-on work that needs to be done around the buildings for upkeep? Or are we simply cleaning and changing out filters and light bulbs?
I could probably, well, it's safe to say that the intent is to make it more maintenance, geared towards maintenance, not just light bulbs, but anything that needs to be done at minor level. Of course, some stuff that requires, a certified electrician or a plumber, and that sort of things we have to contract out. But yeah, anything outside of that, this person would do it. With the public works person that was approved 2 years ago, because of our staffing shortage over at Public Works for driving and other things, that person unfortunately has not been able to do much. However, this spring will probably be the first test. I mean, let me backtrack on that a little bit. That maintenance person actually cleans the facility over there, the bathrooms and the break room. But that's it. It's more of a custodial, not maintenance thing. This spring, the library will have all of that window hardware installed that was budgeted for last year. We have the parts. And so that public works employee, with the help of others, will be doing that work. But up to needing a certified tradesman, we expect this person to be able to handle the job.
All right, and lastly in this budget, and I see it, same thing with this one, DPW, library, and the rec. We had 9% increase for water is the expectation for utilities, and a much larger number on the hydrants, but none of these lines are showing that increase. As a matter of fact, here in facilities, we're showing a decrease in water.
Yeah.
Were we over budgeting and now we've got the right number? Where are we?
I think the town has over budgeted in the past for these. And so I'm trying to bring it down to reality. So that 9% increase that I referred to earlier, I'm going to say it doesn't necessarily apply to this line. It's not a 9% jump.
Okay. And then, go ahead.
Yeah. I look at, for instance, like in utilities for facilities, heating fuel. We've had abnormally warm fall and winter. So I'm pretty sure we can have a lot of savings in that line. We reduced it a bit based on our actuals in 19 and 20. But, we don't want to sell ourselves too short for the following year if it's cold. Sewer, we're probably a little bit over budget there. I haven't had a chance to talk to the sewer department, but I did reduce it by about 13%. In electricity, I think we're right there.
All right, so that brings, when do we start expecting to see savings on electricity from this solar array? I would think somewhere in this budget there would be something, right?
So Mark and I set up a meeting with Revision Energy to talk about, because essentially it went online in December. So we should start seeing energy credits now. So our meeting, I think, is set up. Mark, if you're online, when's that meeting set up?
The meeting's going to be on the 19th. They're going to explain how the credits are going to work, and then we should have a better idea after that meeting what we can try to anticipate for savings.
Okay, so after the 19th, we'll have a better handle really on where we feel electricity would go.
Yes, hopefully.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I don't see anything, Derek.
Okay. I'll move on to planning. Rod Mellison is online. He'll be doing planning codes and contractual services. Planning's Department 11, codes is Department 7, and contractual services is 25. And I'll also touch on the Topsham Community Fund, Department 34. Go ahead, Rod.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'll go quickly through here. Most important thing on this slide is the call out of the staff that work for the planning office. Myself, code enforcement officer, Tom Lister, that's Department 7. Andrew DC, the planner. Title is assistant planner, but I'll give him the planner title. Irene Dubril is our administrative assistant. Next slide. I'm just kind of going through the what you see in the spreadsheets as what's the outside of payroll expenditures for these offices and the revenue that comes into this office. So code office expenditures, I think one year had, he had to buy books to update all of his codes, where you see that spike, but typically that is a maintained line, a steady decline over time. Next slide. These are code revenues. One thing with revenues, what this can tell us is last year we did see the dip, even though Tom was extremely busy with a lot of building permits, a lot of people staying at home and getting building permits because they were in lockdown. It didn't reflect a large amount of money coming in. Comparatively, that I think is trending to shift already. We are at the actual revenue right now to meet that 2019 level or maybe even exceed that. Next slide. Same is true with planning expenditures. Those stay fairly flat over time. So those are the actual expenditures over the last few years. Next slide. This is revenue. And the tale to be told with why I put these together is really, it's not a trend here. Planning and code revenue is definitely dependent upon the market and what we're seeing come in for project development and project review. These are typically site plan and subdivision reviews. Next slide. So these just kind of dip into the actual revenues from those, and that was my story really. The story with 2015-16 is when we changed our fee schedule to reflect the square footage of the projects coming in. So we're getting more revenue based on the size of the development that we're reviewing. Next slide. Same for subdivision. Those fees were changed in 2016-17. Again, those are based on how many lots are being split. That's the fee structure, which mimics all of the surrounding towns' fee structures. Next slide. Okay, we're all ready. Let me take a break and I'll answer questions on planning. And codes, planning and codes.
The one question I got, Rod, the fee structure we redid, I think maybe 3 years ago now, maybe 4.
Yep.
And we made no effort to be the highest and we made no effort to be the lowest. Are we now watching ongoing? You guys periodically taking a look, make sure we're still living in that range?
Yeah, yes, we do, Dave. And we've not seen any reason to come back to adjust where we're at right now. I think over the next year, we will do a survey to see a more intense survey like we did a few years back. I think we're kind of on that typically a 5-year cycle to kind of check in on surveying the surrounding towns to see if where we are in that regard.
Thank you.
Question. Right, I remember we talked about this a couple of years ago when we were formulating all this. I'm just curious as to have you gotten any pushback with these increases? You know, paying fees that were maybe cheap at one time or non-existent, and now we're requiring people to do so.
No, we have not, you know, if they were to complain, my guess is they would perhaps go to the town manager or the board of selectmen to complain about the fees. We have not heard that in our office at all.
Okay. Yeah, I guess most contractors just look at it as the cost of doing business, and that's probably the majority of it, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, Bill, I think we were so low that they were definitely keeping their mouth shut about the fees previously.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Contractual services. So we the comp plan implementation committee was authorized by the Board of Selectmen to release an RFP to rezone the downtown of Topsham. That RFP has been released. The budget for that's reflected in these numbers here. And we will be chatting about that shortly with the Board of Selectmen when we receive proposals. Typically, this line, we're kind of putting all of our eggs in this basket for these couple of years here. We've used this contractual services in the past. If Derek, we could go back one slide on this, maybe back up one. What we've done in the past is kind of have this as a catch-all for a bunch of different projects that we anticipate in the upcoming year. Why we're looking at this, we are looking to focus really heavily on this zoning project. And it looks like it's going to be probably a 2-year project anyhow, after all, you know, to get to a town meeting for a vote. So this is a multi-year project with 2 years of revenue, expenditure or savings to pay for that service.
Any questions on 25 contractual services? Bunch of shaking no heads. Survived, Rod.
Topsham Community Fund. Well, this, you can read this one. This is what this is. It's very brief. They submitted a letter to the manager about upcoming goals and kind of getting back on track with meeting. And, you know, this has been something that I would say from the staff and committee level was a hard one to follow up on this year. I believe the committee is looking to be engaged this upcoming year to follow up on having a more solid process in the future.
Rod, 2018, 2019, we had done that $15,000. We have,
Oh, yeah.
They haven't touched any of that. So there's still an amount there. Is that accurate?
There is, and I'll yeah, and I need to chat with this committee. There was, I mean, I should have highlighted that we did finalize, and I think some of you may have seen in the town office, the completed historic district signs that were part of one of those year's expenditures. So they did finalize that project this past year. Those will be up in the historic district as soon as, you know, construction season and DPW can get out there. There still is funding from the past year, Dave, and if I can, do you want to bear with me while I pull up some stuff, or
I'm not going anywhere.
okay, I just need to search kind of some of the all right, let's see. So in May of 2019, town meeting authorized 22,000 from targeted cap reserve and 5,000 from taxation. So there was 27. I believe a portion of that was for the community center committee. And a portion of that was for the signage programs in general, which included wayfinding and historic district. So for this upcoming year, the TCF did meet a couple times over Zoom meetings this past fall and winter. So finalizing those historic signs was a goal that will be implemented. One of their other goals is actually achieving full representation on the committee itself. There's 3 members on the committee right now. Larry Fitch was just appointed by the Board of Selectmen not so long ago from TDI. Getting full staff support as required by the ordinance is one of their goals. They did discuss exploring boat launch opportunities, which is now being discussed. I believe that's going off to the Board of Selectmen to chat about as well. They want to further implement the signage program along trails and multi-use paths and explore possible community projects that would further the goals of the comprehensive plan, which will be identified over the next year. So they do see the value that they have for the community and want to maintain what they're doing.
Thank you. Are there any questions? We finished everything we got to cover tonight. Did anyone have any that they wanted to go back and ask or anything like that that popped to their head? Seeing nothing. All right. Thank you to everyone who attended this evening. Our next meeting, joint meeting, is Tuesday, February 23rd. That night, we are reviewing 3 of the top 5 departments in the town that account for 50% of the budget, those 3 departments. Make sure we all take a look, and that's without capital. So let's make sure we take a look, and any questions we've got, let's be prepared for it. Look it over before we get in. And then so we have a week off, and then after that, we are on Thursday, February 25th to go through these. So good first night. I had some fears about doing this via Zoom. If anyone's got any suggestions, I would certainly like to hear them. But thank you.
I think it worked out fine.
Yeah.
Your mind was made up, Bill, last night.
Oh, yeah. Well, David and I are, for everyone else, David and I already had a discussion. I'm very pro Zoom. He's not sold yet. I mean, I was a multitask. I'm sitting here cleaning and doing stuff and listening. Come on. It's great.
Well, I have to agree with you. I like the fact you don't have to drive. And for me, who has a terrible memory for names, I love seeing the names up there to go with the faces. Awful. So, thank you, guys.
I have one question for Matt. Where are you at? Why do I see this like walk-in freezer behind you?
This is my facility, my backyard, my business. It's stuff in there, lettuce, oysters, cucumbers, all good stuff. On that sentiment about Zoom, I was actually thinking to myself how pleasant it is that despite all the chaos of this last year, and basically every facet of our lives, we are all still gathered around talking about a budget around the same time we started last year. And it's good stuff. It's just it's a sign of normalcy. So it's nice to, while we're not meeting together, it's still good to talk to each other about this stuff. So yeah, thanks, Dave. I didn't have any issues with this. I thought it went pretty well.
When we get cheese and cookies, we're normal again, okay?
Yeah. I gave Rich a hard time for getting the Hannaford brand. He got pretty offended by that.
All right, folks, I don't see anything. Thank you very much.
All right.
Have a good night.
Thanks.